I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. My name is Scott McDonough. I am the Director of Sales and Global Marketing with the Smithers Quality Assessments Division. You'll notice that the chat feature has been disabled for this webinar. Please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we will answer them as we go through the presentation as well as at the end of the presentation today. After you exit the webinar, a brief survey will appear. We certainly appreciate your feedback. Our presenter today is Glenn Goldney, the VP of Sales and Marketing with Smithers. As a leader for global commercial excellence, Glenn oversees a group of sales and marketing team members in building trusting personal and long-term relationships with clients. He actively engages key stakeholders to understand client needs, goals, and challenges. He values establishing trusted relationship with clients. Glenn believes voice of customer feedback is the key to the company's commitment to investing in new capabilities and capacities that align within the needs of Smithers clients. Glenn serves as the global marketing leader to teams located in North America, Europe, and Asia to create and ensure streamlined brand strategy worldwide. Prior to joining the Smithers team, Glenn held regional and global business development and leadership roles at Rockwell Automation. He has a Bachelor of Arts in English from John Carroll University and a Master's in Business Administration from Baldwin Wallace University. And with that, Glenn, I'm going to stop my share and send it over to you.
Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Appreciate it. I will begin sharing. Thanks, everyone, for joining this afternoon and taking the time out of your Tuesday to join us and to learn more about why mapping and how mapping your customer journey helps you never lose a customer. So let me put this in presentation mode. Wanted to start by talking a little bit about Smithers as a whole to give some context as to how our customer mapping journey process began. Smithers is 95 years old right now. We are headquartered in Akron, Ohio, and we're a global provider of testing, consulting, and information services in North America, Europe, and Asia. We serve a number of industries, 27 or so industries, and we're proud of our ability to deliver accurate data on time with high touch to those industries and the clients that we serve. And that really helps them innovate with confidence. When you look at Smithers as a global trusted partner, we are about 800 plus employees. As I said, we have 14 sites globally, and we are continuously investing in our scientific and engineering talent, and we're proud of our experts in the number of fields that we serve. When we look at who Smithers is, there's 6 divisions of Smithers: the Materials Science and Engineering Division, the Environmental Science Division, the Quality Science Division, which is the virtual quality conference that we're participating in this afternoon, Pharmaceutical Drug Development Services and the testing that's a part of that process, our Information and Marketing and Strategic Intelligence Division, and our newest division is our Medical Device and Testing Product Division. So a wide array of industries served just in these 6 pillars, and delivering really the right technical information to help them make strong and clear, confident business decisions is what we pride ourselves with. We are, when we work with clients, it really is about how we help them is bring great products to market. We don't produce anything at Smithers ourselves, but it is through the strategic consulting, testing, and engineering and in-house world-class teams that work in combination with our clients that help them do this. And so as I share this information with you about Smithers, these slides really also are emblematic of part of the understanding who we are as Smithers and the customer journey that our clients go on in helping our employees around the world understand that. When we looked at why somebody would work with Smithers and what they can expect before we get into the customer mapping portion of this, we started to look at the different things that our clients expected from us and what their journey they wanted to see. So on-time delivery was certainly paramount to our clients when they were looking for us as a producer of data. And they wanted to make sure that those results were independent, verifiable, and accurate. And so those were the most important components of this. And then, of course, the service component is really the relationship management portion that you'll see later in this presentation, but certainly making sure that quality and continuous improvement is part of this, understanding why we work with our clients and the relationships that we have with them to help them truly meet their business goals is a component of our map as well. And then the expertise I spoke of earlier is how do we continuously make sure that we invest in the preeminent experts in the industries that we serve, whether it's rubber, plastics, medical devices, the environmental space, pharmaceuticals, or any new emerging space that we continue to see our organization grow into. We do all of this under with a respect for safety, respect for ethics, and that's in everything that we do in terms of Smithers. So that just sets a little bit of the context about Smithers, and if you've not heard the whole story and are working exclusively with our quality assessments division, that gives you some perspective. So let's talk a little bit about today is what we're calling the customer journey and why it matters. When we look at this, there's a lot of data on customer journeys and why a company, an organization would undertake the process of beginning to map it. We hear a lot about today's customers, and we think of today's customers, particularly because of the internet, as very empowered. They are super informed and knowledgeable about what they want to procure. They are in control of the process, and they use the internet to make those decisions. So we are in the internet 2.0 buying process. And I think have certainly feel or think we feel that customers don't engage with suppliers or vendors until late in the buying process when they've already made up their mind. And so they call us and their purchasing decisions made up. They've evaluated you or your organization against the competition, and you've won out because they've done their research. And this is a snapshot of today's customers. Well, in fact, it's actually really, truly false. And when we look at what the reality of today's customers' experience is, it's much different. The reality is that people in the buying position are very uncertain and are stressed when they make buying decisions, working and choosing a partner or vendor. And they're one of many who are on a raft of stakeholders. And what that means is that nowadays buying decisions are done in committee and by process. And that often overwhelms and paralyzes their buying process. And sometimes that number of choices can completely derail the sale, and so, or their decision to work with your organization. We looked at our own organization and wanted to make sure how were we making the process to work with Smithers as streamlined as possible. Today's customers also feel bogged down, and it takes a lot longer to make a purchase, whether that's a new software platform or a new piece of equipment, or to work on purchasing of some asset or a system. And the people involved in that purchasing decision has increased from 5.4 people to 6.8 people over just the last 6 years. And what companies are doing is they're involving stakeholders from multiple functions. So it's not just procurement, but it may be legal, it may include HR, it may include a number of stakeholders so that the buying committee is certainly more diverse and reduces risk. But as I said, it also certainly creates uncertainty and stresses the process. For some cases, this may slow it down and actually may be fruitful, but in many times it just is overwhelming. When we talk about the title of this session, what is a customer journey? We have to start to understand what that picture is. And it really is a pathway of how business-to-business customers interact with your company. And that means it's their experience with your company. It's not what we believe their experience is with our company. So it is their experience with your website. It's their experience with your outbound marketing and campaigns. It's their experience with your sales teams, your operations and subject matter experts, your leadership team, if they get the opportunity to interact with your leadership team. And it's also, if the case merits it, it's their interaction or experience with your customer service team. And the customer journey covers the pre-purchase all the way through post-purchase experience. And when you begin to examine your customer journey, you have to ask whether those phases of the customer journey are unified or are a disjointed process for potential customers or current and existing customers. Take a moment when we use the Q&A function here to think about how you might describe your current customer journey. When a group of Harvard Business Review asked thousands of executives to describe their customer journey or their purchasing process in one word, this list was what was revealed. Ultimately, it was hard for prospects or clients to buy. It was awful, painful, frustrating, and a minefield. And so their customer journeys were not unified and were very much part of a disjointed process. We hear, I think, these terms all the time in our business when we talk about silos, or we talk about handoffs, or we talk about walls that are built between different functions in our organizations, and how do we try to eliminate those so that prospects and customers don't feel that when they want to purchase a product or service from your organization, that it's painful or frustrating. So if we could take that Q&A function and maybe share your one-word description of what you think your current customer experience or their purchasing process is like working with your organization. This is confidential. Scott and Brian will reveal a few of those here in a moment, but it is useful to think about, again, how you think your current clients would perceive their experience with your company. When we stop to examine the customer journey, it really is by understanding that customer journey, business-to-business companies can stay a step ahead of those customers and lead them on a path that is a great experience when they are buying your product or service. And so you need to know what that map or that journey looks like in order to stay a step ahead of the customer and help guide them or lead them through the process so that it doesn't become overwhelming and they don't derail or self kind of meltdown in terms of their abilities to purchase. So when we talk about how to do it here in a moment, we first should talk about why we should map the customer journey. So mapping your customer journey simplifies customer experiences and helps enable outcomes that the customers ultimately want. This is all about simplification. In fact, simplification was one of the names of our customer journey mapping names in terms of its early stages. We'll talk about what it ultimately came out as. It helps to also visualize the experience of interacting with your brand and putting yourself in your customer's shoes from their point of view and what that interaction may be like when they engage your brand. It definitely helps promote better delivery of expectations. Ultimately, after going through the mapping process and examining your customer journey, what it is that your customers expect. And it allows you to optimize the experience at every touch point when you interact with a customer. And I think this, when we look at our customer journey and what we've gone on, this was probably the most enlightening breakthrough for us. It certainly showed us where we engage with our customers and where we fall short in doing so, and how we can optimize each of those phases that comprise the Smithers journey and also our relationship management component. And it lays the groundwork for meaningful interactions and successful business outcomes. It is about interacting and making sure that we know that clients are coming to us because they have a business with goals and they need to achieve those goals, and they're choosing to work with us or your organization because they believe that ultimately we can help them achieve those business outcomes. It also helps to isolate where you aren't meeting expectations and from outright alienating those potential customers. So it certainly, for us, it certainly put a light on the areas where we were lacking. And we knew that those were areas of focus that we needed to make sure we put extra energy and attention and resources towards. When we talk about a customer journey, it truly is actually visualizing it into a diagram. And so it is a process. When we use the words mapping, it's not just a metaphor. It really does become a map. It does become a diagram. And why that's important is it allows your employees and your team members to use it as a reference or resource to imagine the customer on that actual journey through your organization, from the pre-purchase to the post-purchase process. Why we're talking today is it also helps you never lose a customer. And we'll talk about how we use our customer journey to never lose a customer during one of the most critical phases of this. And at the end of the day, customer journey mapping, client experience, whatever you want to call this, is becoming the expectation of doing business now. It's not okay any longer to simply allow your customers to have a really disjointed, unpleasant, awful, frustrating experience with your organization. One, your organization won't stay around. It destroys certainly the brand presence that you've created, and it becomes the expectations. Once a B2B client becomes accustomed to feeling very much led on a path and being part of a journey that is smooth for them, less turbulent, they certainly become accustomed to that, and that becomes the expectation certainly as they think about working with any organization. So when we think about mapping, it really is no one size fits all. There isn't a software, well, there are softwares, of course, but there isn't a software that will just allow you to put in some inputs and it'll spit out the perfect map for you, or the diagram of your customer journey. So the Smithers organization's customer journey map will look very different from any other organizations. It's unique to our DNA as a company and to the client journey and experience that we've created, and it's part of our culture. It can be linear or nonlinear, and ours is both. And you'll see that when we proceed through this presentation further. What I mean by linear and nonlinear is it shows that the client can follow the path from beginning to end in a very standard process. But there's also times when there are chutes and ladders for a client to have to start at the beginning again because something in their scope or something in their requirements has changed, or something in the Smithers organization has resulted in us needing to step backwards in the process. The map could be time-based. When your product or your service is certainly has opportunity to spoil or has a very critical timing component to it, you should look at the customer journey as component-based of the timing, that making sure that the clients receive that product or service within the window in which they require it. We do talk about on-time delivery and accurate data on time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our journey is from a period from start to finish a certain amount of time. Ours could be much longer. And customers can also start their journey, or prospects can start their journey with your organization at different points on that map. So they may parachute in at a certain area, and so by them parachuting into a certain phase of the journey, you will know, do we need to move them back or move them forward, and what does the journey look like from this point forward? And that's a really great function for us, being able to know, oh, this client is really at this point, and we know what the journey looks like from this point forward. Also, your map should account for all functions, commercial to operations, and we'll talk about that, and not leave out things like legal or procurement or finance or accounts receivable or customer service or any of the other functions that we may think are not directly interacting with our customers, but certainly have an impact on their experience. And so taking the time to engage with all of those functions, those critical business functions of an organization, certainly makes the map much more rich, and also make sure that we uncover all of the areas in which a customer might have an interaction. And what I will say is, what's the most important thing is it takes time, a lot of time, to do a mapping of the customer journey. Certainly it may change based on the complexity of your organization or the history of your organization. And we really learned that you have to dedicate a significant time to this process, but the results are richer and the reward of the process is greater when that time is allocated. So on to the Smithers customer journey map. Smithers embarked upon this process in October of 2016 and completed it in June of 2019. And we are still on the journey of amplification. And the results are accurate data on time with high touch. And as I said earlier, we've had a number of different iterations of this and the namings as we went through the process of mapping, from simplification to, calibration to finally landing at the point of amplification. So when we look at the big picture, we'll break this down here in a moment. Our customer journey is the outer ring. If you think of this as a nucleus or the big picture, ultimately all customers that interact with the Smithers organization on a global basis, anywhere in our organization, any of the divisions in any of the regions in which we operate, fall into this outer ring process. And the 9 phases that are there, and then also our kind of the nucleus is the relationship management component. So the outer ring is called the journey, and the inner component that holds it all together is our commitment, focus, and dedication to relationship management. So for us, what was really important to overcome and what we wanted to prevent and certainly tackle or push back against was any division between our commercial organization and our operations or delivery organization. And so we recognized that as a company, we needed to prevent any walls from going up between sales and marketing and the teams who were ultimately responsible for delivering the services to our clients. And so it was all about coming together for the client's needs, goals, and vision. And it was about creating harmony for those two factions within our organization. And I don't use that word with any loadedness. It's just they were the two parts of the organization that were potentially vulnerable to having some dynamic tension, right? So we looked at how does the commercial involvement and the operational involvement ultimately, how do they both participate in this journey? And so you'll see on the far left what we would consider the most commercial phases of our customer map. And so we call expand is ultimately the expansion of an existing client relationship and looking at how do we serve that client's needs in more ways, helping them achieve more goals, and ultimately have a long-term relationship. As I said, we've been around for 95 years, and certainly we have clients who've been on that journey with us for a very long time. The targeting phase thereafter that is about identifying and looking at ways to grow into new industries, new markets, new geographies, and identifying new potential clients and organizations to work with. And so this is certainly led by marketing and sales, and are ways that we can help companies know that we exist and that we're there to help them and help them achieve their business through the science and bring great products to market. So furthermore, the identify stage, you'll see when we look at this kind of this wave, the blue wave here, those 3 phases really are completely engulfed in this blue. And for us, what we recognize this as is these are predominantly phases of our journey that are led by sales or marketing and are commercial. But you'll see that even on top of that, there is the light yellow, which represents the fact that operations and our delivery teams certainly participate and help to make this a richer experience for those customers when we involve them. It is really scoping for us is this phase where we intelligence gather to make sure that we understand how to participate and successfully achieve the business outcomes that our clients are looking for. Smithers does not approach our clients with canned solutions, and there are certainly cases where we have testing or other types of services that are standard, no question about it. But in many cases, we're approached by organizations that are trying to solve a problem, answer a question, or overcome a scientific challenge. And so it's through engaging our subject matter experts, our scientists, and our experts in this scoping process with the customer that we really begin to understand the goals and needs and of that opportunity or that project. And so you'll see that that's a phase where now you see direct involvement from the yellow or the operations team. The design phase is 50-50, and that's where we internally design what we ultimately believe is a protocol or solution or a way to help that customer achieve that business outcome. And then the phase that we recognize is that you have to present a proposal for the solution that you're have designed. And so this is still commercial, but it's moving towards certainly the operations side. The major shift in ownership for us is between propose, whether we get the opportunity to work with that client or customer or not. And so if we do, the shift in ownership at that point is at kickoff, in which our operations delivery teams begin to own that phase and take the rest of the customer on the rest of the journey through the phase of kickoff, making sure that the assumptions are right, everything was correct in the scope and the design still, and making sure that as they begin the process of delivering on whatever service or solution it is, it's still appropriate. Delivery, we'll talk about more in depth here in a moment. Delivery ultimately looks at what are the 4 scenarios when we boiled it down that could occur during the delivery phase and how vulnerable our client experience can be during the delivery phase if we recognize that either the data is being compromised by some inaccuracy, and making sure that we overcome that. If it's not on time because of some situation that's occurred, we are delivering a service. It's also science, and so there's a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong. We wanted to make sure that we were always communicating with our clients, and that was part of an area that we saw as a vulnerability for us. And so we put a lot of practice in place to make sure that we are constantly communicating with our clients during the delivery phase and keeping them updated. Lastly, in our phase is wrap up. And so this is the opportunity for both the client and our teams to debrief and to discuss what they learned. How can we continuously improve on the process? How can our customers make sure that the next time they come through this process that the experience is even better? And for us, this is a really important, and it doesn't necessarily, if a customer is unwilling to participate in wrap up, we certainly do it internally to make sure that we are learning from every project and every new experience that we have. So this is the journey in a much more linear diagram, if you look at it this way, from beginning to end. As I said before, it doesn't always work this way. And in fact, it can be many times where somebody is in the identify or the scoping stage, for example, and we may need to move more quickly, or they may be, for example, in the proposal stage and we realize that something was missed and we have to go back to scope, or in the design phase may have to go back, or you're in the kickoff phase even and say, hey, something has changed in this process and we need to reevaluate what it is that we're doing in order to deliver accurate data on time with the highest touch possible. So amplification for the Smithers organization has been referred to as the most important initiative in 20 years. We set out on this, we embarked on this journey, this 3-year journey, which we didn't know it would be at the beginning of 3 years, but certainly what we believe came out as, and certainly that journey that you just looked at could appear as common sense, right? These are not complicated phases. There is a lot of detail behind each one of these phases that I'm not sharing today because it takes a couple of days to go through. But what was interesting is, although it appears as common sense, it wasn't commonly known in the organization or globally and wasn't commonly applied in all of our organizations. And what it did was balance, it's balancing sales and operations working together. And so it really was for us making sure we had the right stakeholders from the sales and commercial organization and the right stakeholders from the operations, and forced us to come together and examine those processes, right? It took about 10 to 15 people over that 3-year period to truly get to the final product, and be able to lay out what it does. What we did learn from amplification is that it certainly has helped expedite the onboarding and ramp up time for new team members around the world. So now, as a operations leader or as a commercial leader, you have a playbook to use as part of your onboarding process. You have a playbook to understand what is important to us as an organization when we interact with our customers, and how for us it is important that we never lose a customer. And so for us, this is now a common vocabulary. Our CEO, Michael Hochschwender, says it's about taking care of every client the minute they express a need. And so that need is a simple expression of a conversation, or if there's something that has gone off the rails in terms of any stage of this journey, we know exactly how to respond to that, how to take care of it, and what the right next steps are. How do we do that? So as I said, there's a lot of detail behind each one of these phases, but I'll reveal one for you that is probably the most intriguing, and this comes out of the delivery phase. We as an organization wanted to analyze the number of services that we perform: testing, inspection, audits, every type of consulting opportunity, every type of service that we sell, we examined and looked at how could we put it into a simple flow where we wanted to make sure that the client was always involved, or the customer was always involved. And we also wanted to recognize how do we evaluate that. And so our basis was always, is the data accurate that we're providing the consulting service? Is the audit running appropriately? Is the test running to the protocol or specification? And is it on time, meaning is it meeting the time commitment in the promise that we made to our customers? And so when the answer to that is yes, you're moving to the left of this visual here towards flow A, which is that it's a simple and routine delivery. And of course, we wish that all of our services would run as simple and routine in terms of just standard, meaning it's low amplification, that this is a routine delivery for the organization, and there's little to no interaction, or certainly no interference in terms of this. But as I said earlier, we're in the business of science, and it doesn't always run that way. And so, flow B is a really excellent opportunity. The test objectives have been met. But what's happened is one of our experts has looked at the output of that data and recognized something. There is an opportunity there to talk to the customer, consult with the customer, that the data or the outcomes of that test may have an opportunity to help them better reach their goal. And so it may restart that process. And it is to help them bring a great product to market. It is about saying, hey, there's a little bit of, you certainly have met the expectations of this, but I've seen this before, and you might want to consider something like this. If we recognize immediately that the data is not accurate due to some circumstance, or we will not be able to deliver that accurate data on time, we immediately initiate what is flow C or flow D. And so we had to look at and determine the source or the unexpected results or event. What has ultimately occurred that has made the data inaccurate or is going to prevent it from being delivered to the customer on time? And was it something outside of our control or within our control? And things happen. Certainly a piece of equipment could break down. Today, we had storms here in Akron and power outages occur. There's a number of things that certainly, government shutdowns. We've had a number of things that certainly impact the ability to deliver to a client's expected timing. And we want to make sure that we immediately, this is most important, is we immediately prepare and present a moving forward option and get the client's approval to proceed with that option or stop and wait. And there's also times that, there's something that we've done that is, within our control. We've had somebody unexpectedly leave the organization, for example, who was leading a test. And so again, we immediately reach out to the customers, prepare a conversation, generate and show new timelines, and ask the client whether it's acceptable to proceed or if the client chooses not to move forward with us. But this, for example, as part of our client journey, now our team members around the world know exactly what's expected of them, that they know that we're part of the client involvement is the high touch component of this, and that we're always communicating with our clients. And this has led to numerous success stories of clients being able for us to recover timing, but most importantly, that they understand that we are committed to continuously keeping them updated on their progression of services. So let me talk a little bit about what happened. What's happened as a result of this 3-year experience and us going live. Last July, we trained 16 champs, which is a champion of amplification. We did a train the trainer program globally. To date, about 400 team members in the organization have been trained, about half of our team globally. It's been slightly impacted because these are not, we've attempted to do it virtually with COVID, but we are going to resume in-person training of all team members as soon as we can get back to seeing each other face to face. Customer satisfaction, as I said, is higher than ever before, not only in the commercial side where they feel that it's easier to interact and engage with our commercial organization, our sales and marketing teams, but also that the satisfaction is knowing that if something is not running as expected, immediately that they would be communicated to, and they really appreciate, our customers really appreciate knowing that we're committed to delivering accurate data on time and making sure that we have those relationships, even better relationships with our customers. What's also happened is that we find team members using a common vocabulary. Now they're saying, hey, we're in the scoping phase, or we are now in the design phase, or we are kicking this program off, or we're in wrap up. And so they're able to identify where in the customer journey or from pre-purchase to post-purchase process they are. And so it helps us all be able to plant a flag in the area in that customer journey in where we are in that process. And that's been very useful. It's also led to higher deal quality, meaning that what we're seeing is less of a transactional process with our clients and much greater talk about strategic, certainly goals that our clients are trying to achieve, maybe longer term goals as well, because they recognize that the conversation in the scoping process and the design process is richer, and they're getting more of what they need to help them achieve their business outcomes. Success stories are being captured and shared with our team members around the world globally, and these are certainly motivational and exciting because customers want to participate and say how it's worked. And also we're hearing that, and thanks for the opportunity today to be able to share this with all of you, but our customers appreciate knowing that we invested the time to map our process and unify their experience. We believed that we had a pretty unified customer experience. We're a 95-year-old company. We thought that we were, hometown feel and that everything worked and ran very smoothly. But as we worked through this process and mapped it out on walls and started going through the thing, we realized that, in fact, we had some pretty disjointed areas. We had some areas where we were alienating potential customers or our existing customers, that we knew that we were having certain service departures in areas or vulnerable to service departures in areas because we didn't have it mapped out well. And so this for us has certainly, the investment in the time has certainly also shown our clients that we can improve. So my final thoughts here, today's business processes are complex. There's no question that anytime we try to engage and try to work with an organization outside of our own organization, or sometimes even inside of our own organizations, it can feel painful, frustrating, and disjointed. And this can confuse employees and frustrate or scare away clients if your process is unknown internally, and if it's also very challenging to engage with you externally. And so it is worthwhile to invest the time to lead your customers on a well-designed path. And mapping takes time, but it really helps to never lose a customer. And certainly that is the case. There's ways to approach this, and I certainly would make myself available to answer any questions about this process, but I hope this has inspired you to begin to think about what your customer journey and experience is like and how you might be able to improve upon that. So Scott, thank you for the time. That's all of my slide deck. I would like to certainly invite any questions that people have submitted during the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Great presentation. We do have some questions that came in throughout your presentation, so why don't we go through those now? So one of the first ones we got, Glenn, was what drove Smithers to develop this client mapping process?
Great question. So looking back on the journey, it certainly at first was, I think that our leadership was feeling a bit compelled to make sure that there was harmony between the sales organization and the delivery organizations, and to prevent any artificial walls to go up or allow that dynamic tension to get too great between operations and sales. There might have been early shoots of that, if you will, or early sprouts of that occurring. And as an organization, that's not who we wanted to be. We didn't want to be an organization where you would buy something from the sales organization, throw it over the wall, and realize that the operations team or delivery teams couldn't deliver it. And so we wanted to get all of those organizations and all those functions talking about it. And I also remember the other one. One was called calibration instead of amplification. And so we were trying to calibrate and make sure that we were able to do this. One of the other reasons that we recognized a little later into the process was that as our organization continues to grow around the world and we have new team members join us and we have new services or industries that we are serving, we wanted to make sure that we had a consistent process for the experience. And as we grew, we felt that may be fraying a bit, because it was just getting further away from who we originally were, when the organization was smaller. This has certainly tightened that back up. I hope that answered the question. I can expand it further if we think through that.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you. Next one, who is involved in the development process of amplification?
So there were, as I said, a number of people who were part of the assignment in the team overall. It was initially and early on led by our sales and marketing leadership. And we quickly recognized that was way too myopic of a view, right? So we were focusing way too much on sales and what I think we had actually called it sales calibration as an early customer journey. And so we quickly recognized that that's not what this was about. So we engaged department leaders, we engaged subject matter experts in this, we engaged our senior leadership, including our CEO, for many, many months in this process to not only hear the historical components of the journey and what it may have been, but also to understand the future part of the journey and who we want to be. So HR was significantly involved. And the reason why HR was involved is that it required us to think about potentially new roles and resources that would be required to elevate the customer experience. It also making sure that we had the right roles in the operations to make sure that we met those experiences that we were putting forward in the amplification. It was truly a cross section of our global organization and from all divisions. And so, and people were committed. It was a special assignment that you got to be, participate in, and people really dug in. And I can remember it exposing certainly weaknesses and strengths. And that was a great way for us to have a lot of good dialogue about who we wanted to be, who we were, and what our future vision was.
Thanks, Glenn. Another question we have is, how do we as a small manufacturing company get started with our mapping process?
So there's a lot of research out there, certainly on this. I think there's one component I really forgot to mention, and I regret this, but we also had a lot of voice of customer conversations. And so we reached out to and spoke to over 289 of our customers about what their experience was like. What would they like to see? What would they like us to stop doing, start doing, continue doing? And what would they ultimately like to see as their ideal vision of working with Smithers? So that was one component of the kind of the three-legged stool, was voice of customer. We went out and looked at also benchmarking ourselves against our competitors or like similarly minded companies. There's another component of that. And then the component that I spoke about most intensely today was certainly the internal component. So all three of those came together to create that journey. I do think taking the time to initially begin to talk to your customers, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it is about their experience with you and ultimately what they are, how they're perceiving interacting with you as a small manufacturing company. I think it's a lot of fun. Certainly your research, there are third-party consultants that will help you come in and intensify this. I think that, you know, taking this and being deliberate about it, being a bit slow about it, allowing yourself the time to sit with it and process, you know, what it is that you're trying to achieve through this is great. And I think it's also kind of, who do you want to be when you grow up? And that was what the big question was for us, is who do we want to be when we grow up, kind of thing.
Yeah, great answer. Thanks, Glenn. Another one, what internal obstacles did you encounter when implementing this process, and how did you overcome them?
Great question. So it certainly could be perceived as very prescriptive once you start to look at the detail and information behind any of the phases. And so what we wanted to eliminate was, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't kind of a top-down or corporate initiative, and that it wasn't being perceived as prescriptive. As I said, it was very much common sense, but it wasn't commonly known or commonly applied, or we weren't using a common vocabulary. It was how we were doing business. It wasn't just how we were always doing business. And so we wanted to really highlight and spotlight the areas that were doing great things that were already part of amplification. But also we started to use change management processes. We talked about it. We started to message about it. We started to educate on what we were doing. And because the journey took a period of 3 years, it started to take root in the culture and the mindset of our organization. So it wasn't just a fly-by-night initiative. It really started to simmer and become part of, you know, why we were wanting to be a better organization. And in that way, even some of the most kind of skeptical folks in understanding what amplification was started to embrace it and understand this really was about improving the customer experience, not about improving it for us, but it was about making the experience for our customers even better.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. One of the other questions here, when did you know when you were ready to move from creating this process to implementing it across the company?
That was kind of the decision of our CEO. No, but we recognized that there was a really interesting point when we turned the corner. So we knew that the outer ring of the journey was really the phases of the client experience that were overt and could be linear or otherwise. But what we had this kind of epiphany towards the end of it, which was the high touch component. Accurate data on time is achieved through that journey, right? But it was at the moment that we recognized what the relationship management component meant for us. And that whole center nucleus was really about how do we maintain, nurture, and really preserve strong client relationships. And that for us was when we knew we nailed it. We said, hey, there's something else that we're missing here in just the actual directional portion of the journey. It really is about, for us, the client. And so that's when we knew it was about never losing a customer and how we were to treat people and be thankful for the business that our customers were giving us. And that center component was ultimately the kind of the capstone or the culmination of the journey for us. And so we knew for us, we didn't have to go any further.
Here's a great question, Glenn, I think, and back to your point about common terminology. What do you mean by high touch?
Yeah, that's certainly high touch has certainly changed in terms of this word, in terms of COVID, but it is a abstract notion of what do we mean by high touch is how do we define and meet the customer's expectations of communication, in-person meetings, and also making sure that we are always as responsive or communicating and interacting with our clients and customers at a level that's higher than our competitors. And so for Smithers, it's not just about the transaction or the delivery of the service. It really is about the maintenance of and preservation of the relationship. And so that may be understanding what your client's business goals are. It may be, it's certainly for us, meeting with and seeing clients for no reason at all. It is about making sure that we understand that there are periods of intense times that they'll work with Smithers, and then there's periods of hibernation where they may not be working as intensely with us, but they're still our customers, and we appreciate that. And so high touch for us is really, as I said, an abstract way of thinking about any person, any team member of Smithers being able to contact, reach out to, talk to, pick up the phone, and really communicate authentically, transparently with a customer. And that really is about it. It is whatever ways that we can connect with our customers, communicate with them is how we define high touch.
Great. Final question, looks like, how did you roll out amplification?
We felt that the best way to embed amplification in the culture and in the organization was through a train the trainer program. Why we felt that creating 16 champions of amplification through a multi-week training process was that they would be local in their businesses, and they would be ultimately the folks who could apply amplification, could recognize amplification type of behaviors, and could train a much wider group of people than any small team that developed it, right? And so also it was, if we could develop it, could we teach it, and could others teach it, was ultimately for us a demonstration of its viability. Could it really take root because others knew it well enough that they could teach it and distill it and get it into the everyday, operational behaviors of our team members.
Great, thank you. Looks like that is all of our questions for this afternoon. Glenn, I want to thank you again for presenting this excellent presentation today. And I'd just like to add with a couple of final notes to wrap up. This presentation, along with all of our virtual quality conference videos that we're hosting this week, will be available on smithers.com soon. Everyone who registered to attend will be notified via email when those videos are available. We are conducting additional sessions this week, so if you or any of your team members would like to join, please visit our website and feel free to register. We'd love to have you. When this webinar ends, you will be directed over to a brief survey. It's like 5 questions. If you take a moment to give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate that. And with that, I'd just like to join everyone for joining us again this afternoon, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.